Hungarians will elect their new parliament this Sunday. Will the pro-European Tisza party wrest power from the ruling Fidesz? To talk about it, we're joined by Garvan, Walshe, CEO of the Article 7 Intelligence for Democrats. Good evening, Garvan.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here in Warsaw. Great
to have you with us. So the leaked phone calls between Hungary's foreign minister and his Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov, definitely sent some ripples across the EU. But will they have an impact on this crucial vote this Sunday in Hungary?
I think they feed into a sense that this Orbán regime has presented itself as a nationalist government, but doesn't act like a nationalist government. It seems to be very, very close to Russia. This is despite Viktor Orbán making his career echoing the original slogan from 1956, Russiskie haza, Russians out. Now people are heckling Orbán himself when he gives speeches with the same slogan that he had used back in 1989.
Right. So we have like two scenarios, right? The worst scenario, definitely, for the EU is to see Viktor Orbán remain in office. Now, tell me, what can EU do in case of Viktor Orbán's victory?
I mean, it would be an astonishing polling error if that actually happens. The reliable opinion polls say that Tisza are about 16 to 20 points ahead. So they'd have to be very, very wrong for this to happen. But if it does, then what the EU needs to start doing is using the same tactics it used when Britain was obstructing the financial crisis rescues. This was they engaged in intergovernmental agreements. They had a thing called the European Fiscal Treaty, which replicated financial arrangements that they wanted to do as the EU as a whole, but David Cameron vetoed them. They need to start thinking about that for defence and security, having a sort of separate vehicle, and then once Orbán eventually goes, they can then reconsolidate everything into the EU. This has actually happened several times in EU history. The reason we have a thing called Schengen is because, again, Britain didn't want to join a border-free area, but there already existed something called the Schengen Agreement between the Benelux countries, and so they just added everyone else into it. The EU can get pretty creative when it needs to be, to have parallel arrangements that override an individual veto player.
But isn't it against the EU treaties?
Well, it is and it isn't, because the the member states of the EU are able, as sovereign states, to make any agreement they like. So they will go and make a separate agreement outside the EU treaties with the understanding that once the veto is removed, they can then reintegrate everything back into the European Union itself. Now, you can't do that for enlargement, obviously, because enlargement is about joining the EU. But for most other day-to-day stuff, there is that ultimate option. And usually Orbán has backed down when he's been told we're going to do it anyway. He prefers to be inside than completely outside the tent.
Well, maybe the EU will have to discuss these issues with Péter Magyar rather than Viktor Orbán.
Indeed.
Now, Péter Magyar says that the foreign minister, Péter Szijjártó?
Yes.
All right. Should go to jail for, to serve a life sentence for high treason. Now, do you find it as, campaign rhetoric, or do you really see members of Orbán's government going to jail?
I think it might be more likely in cases of corruption, because although we might consider Péter Szijjártó's conduct to be treasonous, he was probably following the orders of the Prime Minister. So it's quite difficult to be treasonous in that sense. It was secret, it was deceitful. But the illegal stuff comes to corruption, misappropriation of funds, harassment of the opposition, all these kind of things have been done. But to do that, they would also need to change the chief prosecutor in Hungary, who is currently an Orbán appointee. The judiciary in Hungary, by and large, is still fairly independent, but the prosecution service has been very much under the thumb of the Orbán regime from the beginning. And the guy in question can't be removed by a normal parliamentary vote. So this is why having a two-thirds majority is vital if Péter Magyar is to actually restore full democratic rule in Hungary.
I see. Now, Tisza leader accuses the government of attempting an election fraud. Now, what evidence is there that indeed Orbán's people are trying to rig the election?
Well, in 2018, they bussed people across the border from outside Hungary into Hungary to vote in Hungarian elections. In more recently, there's a lot of evidence that they're engaging in vote buying, they're intimidating people who might be dependent on state benefits from being able to vote freely.
You're talking about the Roma minority in Hungary.
Partly them, but also other poor people or vulnerable people like elderly people in state care homes. This kind of thing is very well attested. There's also a thing they call voter tourism, where if you're a Hungarian citizen in Romania or Serbia, you can come to Hungary and you can have an address somewhere and still cast a ballot. Now, that used to be illegal because there were some places that had 60, 70 different people registered in a two-bedroom house. There was even one case of a pigsty with 8 people registered in it. But Orbán, at the last election, made that practice legal. It's an absurd practice. It goes on, but it's not against Hungarian electoral law to ship people across the border, have them registered at places that are obviously far too small to accommodate the number of people there, and then cast ballots. Now, this would usually only happen in a certain number of rural constituencies where there are reasons for mayors to want to inflate the population of their villages because that gives them extra money. Anyway, it's not primarily an electoral fraud kind of thing. It's a wider corruption practice. But these kind of things can happen. And the big deal, though, is not necessarily this or necessarily the counting, but the fact that Orbán uses the resources of the state to be able to reinforce his campaign. Every time he has an election campaign, it's accompanied by billboards that happen to be giving the same messages as the Fidesz election campaign, but from a government perspective. Or he takes out billboards of various hate figures. At the moment, it's Ursula von der Leyen, Zelensky. In the past, it used to be George Soros. And he does this using state money.
And he gets this strong backing from the US, from Russia, and from China. Now, how is it even possible, you know, that this small country in Europe, I mean, that all these, you know, rivals on a global stage agree that they should support Viktor Orbán's rule in Hungary?
The one thing that these three powers can agree on is to weaken the European Union, and that's something that Orbán does better than anyone else. He's able to paralyze it, as we've discussed. He's able to cause internal tensions. He has used his banks to support far-right parties in other parts of Europe, like the Spanish Vox. He has this Matthias Corvinus Collegium that is a huge Hungarian state-funded think tank that is trying to promote ultra-conservative ideas around the continent. Obviously, you know, ultra-conservative ideas can be promoted, but it's striking that he talks about foreign interference while engaging in foreign interference himself.
I see. Now, it's just 2 days to the crucial vote. Now, if you were to advise Péter Magyar, what would you tell him?
In his closing argument in the campaign?
Yeah, I mean, if you believe the polls, there's no need to say anything.
Well, there's always a need. You know, things are never done until the end. And I think it's clear it's one of those campaigns that's about time for a change. They used to say that all campaigns are either stick with us as more of the same because we're quite good, or it's time for a change. And clearly, Péter Magyar is running a time for a change campaign. Hungarians are fed up. And the important thing is for him is that they come out and vote. And in numbers. Last time, the opposition underperformed the polls by 6 points. If that happens, he will probably still win the election, but he wouldn't get a two-thirds majority. So I think he needs to be able to call his supporters out, persuade the waverers, the undecided, and there's two types of undecided. On the one hand, there are the people who used to vote Fidesz or might not have voted, or thinking, actually, I want a bit of a change. It's time for something new. We've had enough of Orbán. And there's also the people who are, you know, more left-wing, who find Péter Magyar too right-wing, aren't particularly inspired by him, but also feel that he needs to be the vehicle for changing the Hungarian political system and restoring full democracy to Hungary.
Will he succeed? We'll learn this Sunday. Garvan, Walshe, CEO of the Article 7 Intelligence for Democrats, was our guest this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for watching, and stay with us for more interviews and news here on TVP World.